Good morning. So I rewrote this last night after my experience yesterday, and I want to share something with you. Yesterday, at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, I stood with Mr. McLean, my wife Laura, and a number of your classmates in front of a 15th century painting of St. Luke drawing the Virgin by Rogier van der Weyden. We marveled at how van der Weyden articulated line and shape and color and light and texture and especially space to give you, the viewer, a sense that you are standing in this room witnessing this very special moment. His intention was for us to see this image as we participate in a service in a chapel in Brussels. And it's an amazing deception. We feel as if we are there. Notice how Luke and Mary and Jesus in the foreplane are larger than the figures in the middle plane. And if you can see it clearly, how much smaller the figures are down on the streets of Brussels in the distant plain. You may also know a little something about linear perspective. Here, the artist uses a single vanishing point to draw our eye past the main figures, past the couple on the wall, and off into the distance where the river runs to the horizon. You may even notice that the crispest edges, the clearest textures, and the most carefully painted details are up close, but the distant horizon is hazy, as though we're looking through the distortions of the atmosphere. Van der Weyden is a master at this illusion of reality, and his intention, and the intention of the patrons of the chapel, is to move us, the viewer, to deeper devotion to our faith. I cannot say whether it is still effective at that purpose, but I do know we can still be amazed at his skill and the beauty of his creation. Because, of course, this is just a painting, a two-dimensional object, not a real window into a special moment in a distant place and time. Wow. For the past 3 years, I've stood in front of the Brooks community to give a chapel speech on academic integrity. In each of these talks, I've tried to get you to think about the joy that we get to share in living and learning together in really awesome relationships. 3 years ago, we imagined what some future encounters might be like between you and a teacher who has meant a great deal to you. Greeting them in the boohoo line at your graduation, seeing them at your 5-year reunion, just like the story I shared last spring at lawn ceremony about meeting Eric Fang for a long talk during alumni weekend. Or even 25 years later, bumping into that favorite teacher in Yellowstone Park and introducing him or her to your family. Also thought about the eclipse of the supermoon and Mrs. Hines telling us that it was going to be 2033 the next time that happens. So if you're a senior and you're 18, you'll be twice your age, and maybe you're holding on to the hand of your child, looking at the next time that happens. In more recent years, I've tried to introduce you to some of the relationships I still have with many of my former students. Marissa, the Navy pilot who struggled with horrific air sickness. Chris, the Brooks economics student who, through sheer force of his self-confidence and despite their skepticism, convinced his class team that he knew the right strategy in a game theory exercise. And he was wrong, and they lost the game. Or Lisa, whose kids loved a whale-watching video I posted a few years ago on Facebook, and who later invited me to lunch to meet her 4 children. I happened to hear from her yesterday. These stories make my heart leap, and that's the purpose of sharing them with you. I will keep telling these stories because they get at the real reason that I keep teaching my students, my colleagues, and right now, you. My greatest joy as a teacher is to get to know you and watch you grow into an adult. And the relationship I've made with my students and my colleagues are among the most meaningful experiences of my life. The Brooks philosophy applies to all of us, doesn't it? My point to all of this is that relationships are what make a meaningful education possible. And meaningful relationships are based on integrity. Now that is a tricky word. Of course, it means being honest, but it means much more than that. Integrity means being who you say you are, being who you appear to be, being genuine, being authentic. If you're putting on pretenses, playing games, or just not letting others know who you really are, then it's very hard to have a genuine relationship. It's a deception. And by the way, if we want to have meaningful, healthy relationships with anyone, we need to live in a community that allows everyone to be their true self. Our community itself needs to have integrity. I get the feeling that you want to live in a home where you can be who you really are, where I can be who I really am. That's a community where I can thrive and where I want to spend these very special moments in my life with you. And that brings me to academic integrity. When your teacher asks you to write a response to a poem, he's not asking you to look up that poem on the internet and to see how others have interpreted it, and even to copy or even paraphrase the ideas you found there. He wants to know what you think, because what you think matters. When a student decides to cheat by glancing at her neighbor's test paper, or copying his roommate's homework, or by using a translator to write her French essay, or by cutting and pasting text from the internet and passing it off as his own, that's a violation of a major school rule. And depending on the level of the violation, the consequences may lead the student facing the discipline committee, suspension, or even dismissal. And that is terribly sad. Over the years as a teacher, department head, and academic dean, I've heard a number of variations on this theme. Almost always it's because it was late. The student had procrastinated and then felt overwhelmed. The student sat in a moment of assumed crisis and made the wrong choice. So what do you do when it's 11:30 and your paper's due tomorrow? Much better is to write to your teacher and to let him or her know that you're sorry, but you didn't plan your time well, and you're going to be late. The best case scenario is that they'll give you more time. The worst case scenario is that they will accept your paper late, but will penalize you 1 letter grade for every day it is late. That is far better than being confronted by your teacher, meeting with your advisor, the dean of students, and me, going in front of the DC, probably being suspended for some period of time, and getting a 0 on the paper. So, how does this sad story connect to meaningful education and relationships? Because when you present academic work that is not your own, you're breaking the trust that you have with your teacher and your peers. You're not being you. And you're not the true you. And you're certainly not the best you. It's a sad deception. So the relationships we have become less genuine, less authentic, and less meaningful. You might shy away from greeting that teacher at your 5-year reunion, or skip introducing your partner or your children because of some age-old twang of guilt you feel about some silly decision you made late at night long ago. But here's the good news. There's always good news. Brooks is all about relationships. And your teachers also recognize that you will make mistakes. That doesn't mean that there won't be consequences for those mistakes, but it does mean that there's room for forgiveness, that the closeness of the Brooks community allows for trust to be regained and relationships to be repaired. Having integrity doesn't mean being perfect, but it does mean that you work hard at being your best self, your true self, in all your relationships, including your academic ones. So what about Roger van der Weyden? How does his work connect with all of this? Well, his craft, his art, was really about an illusion, a deception. Our brain sees an image of the Virgin Mary and the baby Jesus and St. Luke. We see the enclosed garden symbolizing Mary's purity, and we see an accurate depiction of Belgium in the 15th century. We see how the sky actually lightens as it reaches down to the edge of the land, just like it does when we look at the sky. But it's only oil and tempera paint on a piece of old oak. And that's one of the things that makes this art great art. What is absolutely true about this work of art, however, is van der Weyden's eye. And with apologies to Paul Cézanne, what an eye. Thank you.